Internet. I'm Marissa Carr. This is the Great Ojibwe Baking Show, and today we are going to make beer cheese jalapeno bread. This is my first time making a YouTube video, so I'm gonna try real hard to get like good lighting and camera angles and shit, and I hope you guys will bear with me and hang in there while we make this bread. So the first thing we always want to do before we start cooking, and this is especially important during these pandemic times, is to wash our hands. So I'm going to turn the sink on. A lot of people don't know how to wash their hands properly. I do because I used to be a preschool teacher. So when you wash your hands, you want to get between your fingers, you want to get the palms, you want to get around the thumbs, front, back, and wrists, and do it for about 20 seconds, obviously using soap, which now I have. Take them all, put them up against the wall and shoot them, short and tall, watch them fall. Come on boys, take them all, take them all, do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Ooh, that water's hot. Okay, so now that we're clean, we're gonna start getting our ingredients ready. First thing, we're gonna chop our jalapeno. And so one thing about jalapenos is that actually a lot of the heat really comes from not only the seeds, but this white stuff inside. I personally actually am kind of a wuss. I know that many of you who know me, which I'm guessing is pretty much everyone watching this video, because if we're not friends, like, why are you watching this? But if we're not friends and you're watching this, that's awesome. Like, no judgment. Keep watching. Tell your friends. But anyway, I am a little bit of a wuss, and I like my food a little bit spicy, but not super spicy. I think especially for bread, I wouldn't want it really spicy, so I'm just gonna take all of this stuff out. And you know, when you work with jalapenos, the oils get like on your hands and under your fingernails, so like, don't rub your eyes, or, you know, I don't know, wipe your butt until you've washed your hands really good, or that shit's gonna burn. So since these jalapenos are going in the bread, I'm gonna try to cut them like pretty fine, because I don't want big chunks. But again, that's just me. If you're like, I would love to eat bread with big chunks of jalapeno in them, like, live your best fucking life. My knife is a little bit dull, and I don't have like the greatest knife skills in the world, so there's probably a better way to do this, but I'm making it work. Oh man, I think even just breathing that in is making my nose run a little bit. But, you know, notice this is called the Great Ojibwe Baking Show, and my Anishinaabe people are like known for many badass strengths, but to the best of my knowledge, tolerance for like really hot food is not one of them. So, you know, it is what it is. Oh, almost got my finger, but I didn't. You think you got me? You didn't get me. Another really important thing about cooking is to have a clean kitchen, which, you know, sounds really basic, but like, if your kitchen's dirty and you're cooking food in it that you or somebody else is going to be eating, that's kind of gross. And also, cooking is so much easier when your shit's clean and you have space, whatever. Anyway, so next we're going to start measuring our dry ingredients. Next up, we are going to do 3.5 cups of flour. I'm just using a measuring cup. I know a lot of like cookbooks and stuff will tell you that you should measure your flour, which is maybe true, but I don't have a scale, so I'm just using a measuring cup, and I am like 80% confident that everything's gonna be just fine. So okay, got clean hands again, ready to go. Got my 3.5 cups of flour. So now we're gonna start mixing in our other ingredients, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the things that we're gonna put in this to make our bread. First, we're gonna talk about leaveners, which is a little bit of a tricky subject in our current coronavirus climate because there is a nationwide shortage of this shit right here, which is yeast. You know, I like fast rising yeast because it's fast, but you can use the regular kind too. This shit came from Aldi. I have like a packet and a half of yeast left, and I do not know when there will be yeast again. And like, people are dying. There are real problems in the world. Not having yeast is not a real problem, but I want to try and stretch this shit as long as I can. So, you know what else has yeast in it? Fucking beer. This beer, by the way, is called Spotted Cow. It is a very good beer. It is only available in Wisconsin. Wisconsin against the world. It's one of my favorite beers. It is a beer that I have a 12-pack of. So this is what we are going to be using in our bread. We're going to use a little bit of we're going to use a little bit of yeast, a fair amount of beer, and just to be on the safe side, we're going to throw a little bit of baking powder in there. Will this work? I have no fucking idea. We're going to find out together. I do know that times in the past when I've made fry bread and I was worried I didn't have enough time for it to rise, I would use yeast and baking powder both, and it always turned out just fine. So, you know, we're just going to try that shit and see how it goes. Oh yeah, we got our little measuring cups. This is a 1/4 teaspoon, so we're gonna put a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast in here. And something you should know about yeast is that really fast rising yeast you can mix directly in with your flour, although recipes very rarely will tell you to do that. But if you don't have fast rising yeast, you actually have to bloom it in water before you mix all of your stuff in, or in liquid. So anyway, I mixed that in. I'm gonna open my beer. Oh, before we open the beer, actually, the other things that I want are I want a little bit of sugar, and not a lot because we don't want it to be sweet. We just want the yeast to have a little bit of food to eat. So I'm just going to do a teaspoon. Yeah, because yeast actually is a living microorganism, and like so many living things, it needs food. We're going to add just a tiny bit of salt, like a pinch, but something to know about salt is that salt can kill yeast. So when you're baking bread, often you don't want to add a lot of salt at the beginning because it could be the thing that makes your yeast not rise. Next up, we're going to add some cheese. Normally I would make this a jalapeno cheddar bread. We have here some Wisconsin extra sharp cheddar. Once again, shout out to Wisconsin, the best fucking state. But I have all these other cheeses that I just kind of want to use up. So I'm going to throw some different kinds of cheeses in here. And I usually don't even like Swiss cheese, but I made French onion soup, and like, you kind of have to have that. This is also just leftover cheese that has to get used up. So we're going to throw some of that in there. But for real, I do want some of this, not only because it's delicious, but also I think that in this particular bread, the yellow color will be attractive. A little bit more. All right, So in our bowl now, we have flour, we have 3 different kinds of cheeses, a little bit of yeast, a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar. Another thing we need, I mentioned the baking powder. Oh shit, I just broke something, you guys. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. I just accidentally dropped and broke my measuring spoon, which was not great. Also, I'm barefoot, and you know, my mom always says, like, if you break some glass and you're barefoot, you gotta get out of the kitchen and put shoes on, which makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, I'm like, fuck it, like, maybe whatever happens is just whatever fucking happens. But anyway, I cleaned it up, I'm fine, the spoon is not fine, but like, rest in peace, we all move on. Cool, so, baking powder, I'm gonna add like 2 tablespoons of baking powder, which is kind of a lot, but resources are scarce right now, and I am not here to take dumb chances. Cool. Last thing that we're gonna throw in here is some marjoram. And I honestly am not super familiar with this herb. Last time I ordered groceries, I ordered basil, and they brought me this instead, but at the same time, it was like, you know, you're out there like risking your life in a pandemic to bring me fresh herbs, so like, and other stuff. I didn't place a grocery order just for fresh herbs. I'm not a monster. But anyway, yeah, it's like you're out there risking your life in a pandemic to bring people groceries. So like, how mad am I gonna be that you brought me the wrong fresh herb? But anyway, I tasted these and I thought that they would be pretty good in some beer cheese bread. So I'm just like taking them and pulling the little leaves off the stems because like the stem part, we don't want to eat that. We really just want the little leaf part. Okay, so now that we have a good amount of the marjoram pulled off the stems, we're just gonna give these guys a little chop. Yeah, we're just gonna give these guys a little chop, and like I was saying before with the jalapenos, you know, if you have like really good knife skills, you might know a better way to do this, and that's cool. I do not have like really excellent knife skills, so I'm just making it work. You know, I read on like a cooking website or something that some chefs say that the way that you chop food will change the flavor of the ingredients, and I 100% do not believe that. I am calling bullshit fake news. Like, prove me wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't fucking know, but that doesn't seem to make any fucking sense to me. Okay, so now we've got all of our ingredients here, all of our dry ingredients anyway. And I'm just gonna use my hands to kind of like mix everything around, make sure it's all well incorporated, as they say. All right, so that's looking nice. Got everything in there. And now I'm going to measure out the 1/2 cup of my beer. And a trick that I learned when I was a teenager, like a 14-year-old in the punk scene, I should have done this from the beginning, but if you like pour your beer so that it goes against the edge of the cup, then you won't get as much foam on the top. You can see I have a lot of fucking foam because I started pouring it right into the bottom, but for now I'm gonna pour it on the side like that. Less foam already, yay! Now I kind of have to start tilting it up or it's gonna spill. All right, and we needed a cup and a half of liquid. We have like a cup and a quarter, which is a little bit less than what we wanted. So I'm just gonna dump in what I have. And you can see it's all nice and foamy. Okay, and for the other quarter cup of liquid, I'm just doing a quarter cup of warm water, which is actually really good because warmth is gonna help our yeast multiply. And now I'm gonna mix all this together. This is my favorite bread mixing spoon because it's super fucking sturdy. Like, you could probably fuck a human up with this spoon, so you can definitely go to town on your bread dough. One thing that I have learned over my years of baking is that when I'm mixing, especially like a really kind of stiff dough, I don't like to use spoons that have holes in them, just because when you do that, oftentimes the dough will get like stuck in the little holes between the spoons, and then it makes them really hard to wash. So I'm mixing this until you can see I have kind of a shaggy dough. It's not all the way incorporated. It's not done. That's okay. I'm gonna go throw my spoon in the sink. And now I'm gonna take a little bit of flour. And I'm just gonna like sprinkle it down here. Get my hands floured up so that they don't stick either. And, oh shit, you know what I forgot to put in this bread dough? Fat. Yeast also needs a little bit of fat to work. So I really should have mixed this in earlier, but you know what? We're adjusting as we go. I'm basically making this recipe up. So I'm just gonna pour in a little bit of oil. And we'll try to mix that in too. I'm just gonna use my hands. Is this the best way to do this? 100% no. That should have gone in with my beer and my water, but here we are, better late than never, right? We adjust and we make things work. Cool. So now I really have a shaggy dough, and I'm gonna tip it out onto my floured countertop and just give it a little quick knead. And you know, typically if you are making a yeast bread, you always want to knead your dough. And if you are making a quick bread, which is what we would call a bread made with baking powder rather than yeast, you would not knead it. Now this bread, we have both. We have a little bit of yeast, we have beer, which hopefully you should have yeast in it. That's my working theory. And we also have baking powder. The worry about kneading baking powder bread is that it will, or a quick bread, is that it'll become tough. But a yeast bread, if you do not knead it, it will not develop sufficient gluten structure. And gluten is the protein that forms when flour is mixed with a liquid, and it is what gives bread its structure and allows it to rise. So, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to give this a little knead. I think I'm not going to knead it as long as I normally would if it were a total yeast bread, but I'm not totally leaving it alone like I would if it were a quick bread. And really, when you knead dough, you want it to form kind of like a smooth mass, which we're starting to get. You want it to be a little bit tacky on the outside, which we're also starting to get. Let's see. Yeah, that's breaking, so I'm gonna knead it a little more. Like I said, this is an experiment. Is it gonna work? I guess we're all gonna fucking find out together. Okay, I kneaded my dough. I'm feeling pretty good about it because I can grab it and pull and it stretches. It doesn't break right away. While I was kneading, I realized that I had forgotten to mix in the jalapeños. So I just kneaded them into the dough, which is something that you can totally do, especially with like things like jalapeños that are like little chunks. Just, throw it on top, give it a good knead, and they will end up getting mixed throughout the dough. So, this is my favorite bowl for making bread. I oiled the inside of it. And the reason why I like this bowl for making bread is that it has a lid, which is great because when your bread is rising, you want to cover it with something. A lot of people use a damp towel, which is cool. You can totally do that. I personally really like my bowl with a lid. So like I said, I oiled the inside. I'm gonna throw my dough in here, cover it, and then what I did before I started this was I turned on my oven. This dough is not ready to bake yet, but yeast doughs will rise a lot better in a warm environment. And so a lot of the time if I'm baking bread, I'll turn my oven on a little bit before I start mixing everything, and then turn it off and let the dough rise in the warmed oven with the door cracked a little bit open. You don't want it so hot that your bread is going to bake. And also, if I'm using this bowl, it can't be so hot that the plastic will melt. That would also be a problem. But yeah, so I made this dough. I'm gonna let it do a little rise, see what happens, and I'll be back with you guys. Okay, I'm back. The last time I was recording, I was like, bread dough, will it rise? I don't know. And oh boy, did it ever. Yeah, we got a really nice rise on this dough with a tiny bit of yeast, but mostly beer. So now what we gotta do is punch it down, which is just basically you just fucking punch the bread like that. Give it like a few nice little punches to get all of the air that was that was in it kind of out. Once you got it, you can kind of smush all of the air out of it. And we can also start thinking about how we're gonna shape our bread dough. Now, when I bake this, I'm gonna bake it inside this, which is a Dutch oven. So right now, I just started preheating my oven to 450 degrees. I'm gonna pop this Dutch oven in there so it can start getting hot and give us like a really nice crusty crust on the bread. But so since I'm baking it in this, I know that I want my bread to be kind of round shaped. So I'm gonna start kind of like shaping it into a little round. I believe in the bakeries they call this a boule. Yeah, now I gotta fucking get it up off the counter. Got it. I just put it back in my bowl to do its second rise. This time, obviously, I am not going to have it rise in the oven because the oven is going to be fucking hot and I'm not trying to bake it yet. But we'll let it rise in here for probably about another half hour, 45 minutes. See how it goes. And then we'll do the next step. Hello, and welcome back to the Great Ojibwe Baking Show. As you can see, we've got a nice second rise on our bread dough. And we also pulled our Dutch oven out of the regular oven. You're going to want to use like oven mitts or something because this is quite hot. So before I put my dough in here, I'm going to do a couple things. The first is that I cut, fuck, I bet that's really loud on camera, huh? I cut a piece of baking parchment. So I'm going to put these gloves in and try to kind of line the inside of my Dutch oven with this parchment to keep my bread from sticking. Ow, fuck. Don't do that. Don't fucking burn yourself. That's not good. Okay, cool. So now that I've lined it with parchment, this next step might not be strictly necessary, but I feel like we've come this far, so probably better to be safe than sorry. But I'm also going to take some oil and a piece of paper towel. and try to kind of grease the inside of here. Okay, there's some shit I just did that I thought I recorded and did not, which is not ideal, but not the end of the world. Basically, though, I just took the parchment and lined the inside of the Dutch oven, and then I really carefully scooped up my dough from the blue bowl because we had already shaped it into our round shape, our boule, before, and kind of just patted it in there so it's like sitting comfortably inside the Dutch oven. And now I'm gonna put the lid on the Dutch oven and pop it in the regular non-Dutch oven at 450 degrees. Okay, our beer cheddar jalapeno bread has been in the oven at 450 for about 20 minutes, and you can see it's starting to rise really nicely. So at this point, I took it out for a quick little break, and there are a couple things we're gonna do. One is that I sliced some more jalapenos, and I'm gonna sprinkle these on top of the bread. And as I'm sprinkling, I'm discovering that I really have to like place them more. Sprinkling was not a great success. That's okay. Ooh, hot. I placed those on top of the bread. I also have some of my cheddar left, so this I really can sprinkle. I'm gonna sprinkle some of this on top of the bread too, and this is gonna give us like a nice cheesy crust. I'm gonna try to kind of like cover the whole surface of the bread. If you can hear a little crackling, that's the the cold cheese hitting the hot pan. Great. So this is what it's looking like now, and now I'm gonna pop it back in the oven for about another 20 minutes without the lid this time so that the top can get nice and brown and crusty, and then we'll be back to check in and see what it's doing. Okay, our beer cheese jalapeno bread is out of the oven. It's looking pretty good. So now for the moment of truth. When you cut bread, if you've never cut bread before, you always want to use a serrated blade. That's the one with the little teeth in it, if you don't know. If you use a blade that is not serrated, you're just gonna like smush the shit out of your bread. So if you have a bread knife, that's great. If not, try to use a serrated blade. And yeah, we just took this out of the oven. Let's see how we did. Pretty good. That's pretty good. I threw some butter on there, and this is some tasty bread. It would be a great bread to eat with like maybe some chili, or a good bread to eat while you were watching a sporting event on TV. Unfortunately, there are no fucking sports right now, but maybe there will be in 12 to 18 months. I don't fucking know. This is a weird fucking time to be alive. But I was talking, or rather texting, with my friend Larissa earlier this week, and she said that her mom was baking bread because she said, well, I know how to bake bread and a lot of people don't. So every loaf of bread that I bake is a loaf of bread that can stay on the shelves at the grocery store so that somebody who doesn't know how to bake can have bread too, which I think is a really lovely way of looking at the world right now. So, stay safe out there, bake bread if you can, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Great Ojibwe Baking Show.